We are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another one, guys. And today we are continuing in our look at the Indianapolis Colts free agents. We have already talked about a number of players. If you haven't yet, be sure to go check out those. And we are rounding it out with Derek, what we would consider the top tier guys, the top tier free agents. We're finishing out with the last guy on our list. And that guy we're going to talk about today is Grover Stewart. Now, Derek, obviously a guy that's been homegrown by the Indianapolis Colts, was selected in 2017 in Chris Ballard's first year as general manager, and has been a guy that's been a consistent force at that defensive tackle, one tech for the Colts for a long, long time, is so valuable to what they do. It is one of the highest graded players for the Colts in 2023. And so, Derek, talk to me about Grover Stewart, what he's been to this organization, and how important he is to what the Colts do defensively.
Well, no doubt that you know the impact of a Grover Stewart immediately when you look at the numbers. You know, you ask anyone to look at the outlier of what it is of, especially when it comes to Indy's rush defense. They give up an average of 40 more yards per game when he is not on the field. So it is very clear that he is a huge presence there in the middle of the field when it comes to the rush defense. Just ultimately, we know when it comes to the pass defense, not really much Grover Stewart does in that category. So, I mean, that's pretty much why you have DeForest Buckner there in the middle, and that's why Grover Stewart's typically not a every down defensive tackle because of the limitations that he does have from that perspective. But no doubt that when it comes to the overall stopping the run, this is definitely a guy that does it better than just about everybody else in the NFL. So definitely was a guy that is worth the money that he was getting from the contract that he recently got in 2020, where they paid him that 3-year contract worth almost $31 million.
Yeah. No, for sure. And you saw, when Grover missed 6 games due to that suspension, you saw how the defense suffered for it. The Colts couldn't stop the run at all. They didn't seem like they didn't even have a prayer to stop the run when Grover missed it. It was definitely clear how important his presence was. And when he returned, the run defense as a whole got a whole lot better. And Grover's presence, I think, just helped a lot of people on that unit to be like, all right, he's our guy. He is the guy up the middle that sets the tone for what we do defensively. And so, like you mentioned, like he's just such an elite run defender. And, he's one of those guys that you just, you cannot take him for granted because he is so valuable to what you do. And for a defense that's really, Derek, I feel like the last couple of years under Gus Bradley has really transitioned to trying to get after the quarterback a lot more. And obviously we've seen that happen. We knew that it was bound to happen, that the Colts defense that had some elite moments under Matt Eberflus at stopping the run, we knew that might, taper off a little bit. And it certainly has the last couple of years. So I think just having a player of Grover's caliber just adds to that need and that necessity, to have a couple guys in there that can really, when it matters, now those second, third and ones, fourth and ones, where you just need a stop and they're likely going to run a short yardage play. You need a player like Grover Stewart who is elite in that area. And so I think just his value there and what he's provided for the Colts over the years and has consistently been one of the best one techs in the NFL. That's not super easily replaceable, Derek, to find a guy like Grover Stewart who can do that. And we saw like different teams who, when you're able to take the run away, especially when you're playing young quarterbacks, that really opens up things for you to be able to get after the quarterback and really be able to do a whole lot more and make a team very one-dimensional in that way. And there's obviously, in the AFC South, there's a good amount of running backs that you're going to have to face, presumably in the next couple of years, that are pretty solid. So the Colts are definitely going to have to do their best, to make these teams one-dimensional, enforce, opposing quarterbacks to really beat them throwing the football. And so I think just having Grover Stewart in there just helps your defense out, obviously with his play, but also just with the confidence of that defense, like we saw last year in 2023.
Yeah, and it definitely will be interesting to see how Indy approaches bringing Grover Stewart back. No question, he is definitely a fan favorite, and he's definitely a favorite inside the building. No question that they love Grover Stewart, and that's why Chris Ballard gave him that 3-year contract worth $31 million back in 2020, and it basically made him one of the top 20 highest paid defensive tackles in the league. Because again, you're one of the best at what you do when it comes to stopping the run. I think the big question, Cody, that a lot of people are going to have when it comes to Grover Stewart is, he's 30 years old, right? He's definitely not going to get any younger. But it doesn't seem like the effects of time have really hit him yet. He definitely is still really good at what he does, no doubt. But, there's that question mark of, do we really want to increase the amount of money he's making per year because for him to basically only be a run stopper? He is virtually useless in the pass rush department, Cody, but when it comes to the run stopping, he is the best of the best when it comes to that. I want to ask you, do you think that just being one-dimensional the way Grover Stewart is, but as impactful as he is at that one thing that he does well, do you think that's worth having an increase in the amount of money per year that he is worth? Is that worth it for a guy like Grover Stewart? Or do you feel like there could be an option out there that gives you the option to potentially find a better pass rushing defensive tackle for the future?
Well, I mean, you also look at it and you have over $70 million. So, you think bringing back Grover to be elite in that area, you still have a lot of room, for different packages. And you really, Derek, don't. I mean, I think when you look at this Colts roster, you really don't have another stud in the interior, obviously DeForest Buckner, but like at that one tech that can come anywhere close to what Grover has done. And so I think it's worth paying him a little bit more. I know it was like $10 million roughly that he got with that first extension. But I mean, like you said, he has shown no signs of slowing down. He's continued to be one of those most dominant guys. I understand when it comes to that. But again, like you look at it and there's all these different players, but nobody truly stops the run as elite as Grover does in the middle. Like nobody even comes close on this Colts roster. And so, like we said with guys like, Michael Pittman, Kenny Moore, Julian Blackmon, like there's not a viable replacement out there on this current roster right now. And so I think for that, Grover just showed you again how valuable he is to this team. And Derek, I always go back to what Chris Ballard's philosophy has been about when, you have these players that are homegrown, like a Grover Stewart, who go out there and they perform well. You extend them. And I know he's getting a little bit up there in age, right? He's 30 now. So he's getting closer, but I just go back to that. What does that say to your locker room for a guy like Grover Stewart, who has gone out there and has continued to be elite at stopping the run? If he's played well, and you clearly have seen it on your defense this year, I just think that honestly makes him even more valuable for what you saw, because you proved without Grover, we're basically screwed at stopping the run in the interior, or at least you were last year. So I think that honestly, that makes me feel very okay about giving him a little bit more if that's his market value, and re-signing him for a couple years, because he's just so valuable. And also, Derek, you have a couple needs that you want to really focus in on. Why not bring back a homegrown guy like Grover and worry about, finding his replacement in the next number of years? I don't think this is the offseason to do it. Now, I certainly would like them to add somebody behind him who is at least semi-competent. Derek, I was looking at the PFF grades earlier today. The two lowest graded guys on this Indianapolis Colts defense were two guys that tried to replace Grover Stewart. That was Taven Bryan, and then that was Eric Johnson. They were both horrendous last year for the Colts. So if that tells you anything, about how bad this run defense was for the Indianapolis Colts. I think that should tell you all you need to know about Grover Stewart. And I get what you're saying. Certainly, you'd like to see him get after the passer a little bit more. But again, I do think like there are other guys on the other side of things, who are more pass rush specialists, who just come in on third down or something. So, Grover's maybe the opposite of that. And, he's only comes in maybe on early downs or on, third and short and things like that, short yardage. But I do think he's a guy that you have to extend just because of how valuable he is. And really the inability you've shown. I know you haven't thrown a lot at it, but you just don't have a ton of guys right now that you feel like, okay, if we let Grover walk, we have a suitable guy in there that's going to produce even at like 10% of his level. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I will say the defensive tackle market for free agents this year, Cody, is very saturated. There's a lot of defensive tackles that are going to be going into free agency this year. Not just a bunch of them, but I mean a bunch of really good ones too. I mean, at the top, when you look at the top, I mean, Chris Jones is up there, Grover Stewart's up there, someone else is up there. And then Fletcher Cox. Those are some of the guys that are at the top of the top right now. But I mean, even the list going further down, when you talk about overall what people are making right now, there's a bunch of really good defensive tackles that are definitely worth that. And, maybe that plays into the favorite for Indy is like, hey, yeah, you could go somewhere else. But I mean, there's a lot of teams that are going to be looking for a defensive tackle this year, and there's a lot of good ones out there. So maybe it won't be good. Maybe you won't get the money that you kind of wish you would get even if you just came back here. Like, I mean, I don't doubt that Indy's probably going to end up paying Grover Stewart another $10 million a year at least going forward. But I mean, like you said, the biggest one there is Grover Stewart has a lot of the leverage. He says, I mean, again, look at what I did when I was on the field versus when I was off it. You guys were trash stopping the run without me. And when I'm out there, you guys stand a chance. So, I mean, you're right. It kind of is one of those things where Indy doesn't have an answer behind it. Even with DeForest Buckner being there in the middle, DeForest Buckner still is not able to do what he does without Grover Stewart and Dio Adangbo being who they are on the other sides, because they warrant so much. They warrant so much ability and so much time and effort on their sides, especially for Grover Stewart's side, because Grover Stewart just bullies people so much in the middle. He eats up double teams like it's nothing, and it just opens up a lot of different things for these other guys in the run game to be able to make plays, because Grover Stewart just doesn't get beat off blocks. So it's definitely interesting. I mean, this one's probably one of the more crazy ones to me, because I do believe that and I really don't think Grover wants to go anywhere. It will be interesting to see how this Grover Stewart contract goes down, because a lot of different ways it could go, but no doubt I still think he ends up being a Colt by the end of this free agency.
Yeah, he certainly should be. I think all signs point to the Colts wanting him back, and obviously they need him. So yeah, no question that Grover Stewart, you need him back. He's so valuable to what you do defensively, and he's just been, like him and DeForest Buckner have just been so good together. They're such a good tandem together in that middle, and they make one of the top units, when it comes to the 1 tech and 3 tech. So yeah, absolutely. Grover Stewart needs to be back for the Colts. And I think like you talk about, DeForest, like making DeForest had life a lot easier too, and making him a lot happier to know that there's that guy that's going to demand more of those special teams or more of those double teams, and is going to, allow guys like Buckner and Dio and all these guys to be able to, make some plays. So definitely think Grover is so valuable, and that's just a position, Derek, naturally at that 1 tech that it's not always flashy. It's not going to always get the craziest stats. I know he's never been like a stat guy, but also I don't think he necessarily has to be all the time because that's not really his game. That's never really been his game, and that's okay. But, he does a lot of the dirty work that maybe the stats don't indicate. And I think that's another reason why you look at it, and you can't just pay him off of pure numbers all the time.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. Well, that's going to do it for this one, guys. That is us talking about Grover Stewart and whether or not he will be back with Indianapolis this offseason. Let us know your thoughts. Do you think the Indianapolis Colts should be looking to try to keep Grover Stewart around, or do you think there's a better option out there? But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.